Dune, Dune. I've been waiting a long time to talk about Dune. It's been, I don't know, almost a decade since I read the books, but when I read it, I noticed it was fractally plugged into a ridiculous level. Like, definitely channeled material in some way, and like the pulse of it is, I would say it might be opposite Tolkien. Like, I think Tolkien had I think Tolkien was writing his story based off of his visions of the heavenly realm, like the higher reality, the Platonic realm, the Christian realm, the heavenly realm, the place from which the the music and the notes come from, the place that the pattern emerges from, right? I think Dune is tapped into looking at the pattern of the matter and the pattern of the biology. Like Dune, I don't know if we'll see if I can get into it right now or like rechannel it or whatever, but Dune has an insane analogical resonance with like the endocrine system, molecular biology, cellular biology, different like dopaminergic pathways basically in the body, and just looking at how reality works from like the ground up, like the matter. And so it's like the matter of reality has its own mythos, like the mythos of like power and psychedelic visions and hallucinations and hell and jihads and murder and just the visceral body. It's like it's such a like everything in the Dune universe is kind of like embodied. The mythology goes back into like deeper and deeper like physicality in a way. Like you see what it kind of split in that direction. And so like the heavenly story almost never happens, but it's like always happening. And so the heavenly story has like a focal point in history, and then that creates all of history that sort of exists, is kind of that shape. But inside of that or outside of that is the non-physical or non-expressed heavenly realm. It's almost like all the air that you're not touching is where the inspirations for things like Lord of the Rings, and the higher heavenly mythologies. And so those things kind of it almost never happens. But it does kind of happens, and the closer that you get to the center of it, the more it just gets pulled tighter and tighter together. So Dune is definitely a look downward. You could say you look at it like you look at Tolkien, who like just didn't like Dune, right? So it's oppositional, right? Like Tolkien doesn't think Dune even rhymes with his stuff. It didn't jive. Right, so the Dune mythology is looking into the currents, the forces, the politicization. Like if you look at the water, like look underneath how everyth's behaving in the water, right? Let's say that you have the heavenly realm. Imagine it like sound speakers. Those sound speakers are causing vibrations on the surface of the water. The surface of the water is what you would call reality. And so it's the the imaginal, or the whatever, the place from which the music is coming, the music is the pattern, be it atomic vibrations or stories or whatever. You could say all of that is coming from space, like that's where the vibrations would come from. And then under that, you have the stuff that is vibrating. So that's the surface, like the surface is what's vibrating, and then under the surface is all the other water, and you can actually follow and trace that water, and you can tell where waves are coming from and where they're going by looking at the movement and the behavior of the water. And there's currents in it, and so you can see these currents as like forces and subterfuge and political drama, as like everything in reality is all swirling around. Like, how did that get there? And like, oh, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then that leads to another type of mythology, and that's the lower mythology of like true crime, like the material sciences. Like that's the looking into the world, and you see the world of matter, right? That's the water, that's the medium that is creating the surface, right? Like this surface is dictated by me. So the reason that like the surface of my body moves the way it does is because of the undercurrents that are going on inside of it, you would think. Like that's what our theory of study is for matter. So those currents inside are, it's ultimately dictated by the totality of the whole system, but the vibration on the surface, the way things are, that's held in place with these higher heavenly patterns. It just kind of holds things in place. It's the reason everything would have body and shape, and it's the ultimate, like, that's why things are the way that they are, and that is the way they are. But then if you go into the matter, it's like, as an isolated individual, if you start moving around within the pattern, you can trace currents, and those are causal changes of like why this led to this led to this. And it's like, if you interfere with that process, you can break the chain of being, and you feel like you have control over moving the submatter of existence around that, be that your own psychology, what's under here, the directions of my desires and my impulses. And it's like, oh, if I move those around, I can control where my body goes. And so when I first read Dune, I was like pretty well versed in molecular and cellular biology, and it was like, whoa, the connections that were going off, and like that's what's going on. And I think that has like a big reflection of some sort. You could see, I think, like it's interesting that zeitgeist, or that way of telling story was played. It was like the first decent movie in who knows how long. So is that culture getting the ability, or it's creating or looking into that, which you could see you can't look into it unless you're stepping away from it. Right, so like what everyone used to be mired in with the creation of myths like Dune, maybe that's us stepping out of the currents, and you sort of see how things work for a second as you step out of it, and you go, oh, okay, and then it's like, oh, as you step further out of it, oh, it's held in place with this eternal vibration thing, the Platonic heavenly forms. And if you find yourself harvesting wheat in the fields of Elysium, then something, and you're already dead. Remember Gladiator? That was like a 60% quote from Gladiator, which is where one of the movies that I learned how to fight by watching. Not Russell Crowe, but that huge dude. and I picked up his fighting style, and I only fight people when it's the same ratio as what he was doing. So I was like, this guy's doing pretty well, and I'm like, I'm only gonna fight. I'm like 6'2", so I only fight guys that are 5'2" and under. But it's the mythology of control and power and the Messiah, and it's like a warning and a danger against it. But it's like, I think it's a window. It's those are the I don't even know how to describe it, but those mythologies, like books, narratives written of, like, I guess it's conspiracy. This led to this, led to this, led to this. And that is why, the water flowing that way it's why the water feels the way that it does. Those currents are there. But the picture of reality is only at the surface. And the surface is just sort of like held in place or moved by basically outer space. If you look at the surface of the ocean, like, why is it doing what it's doing? It's like, yeah, there is all the movement of the water, and that is why this went there, but it's ultimately like what's coming down from the top. And so ultimately, like, truth is going to be that middle layer of reality without any digging into that or worrying about and just looking at what reality is doing. And then that's that type of narrative would be called truth. And so people do that all the time. But yeah, the sandworms. Spice. So the galaxy, like the body, you can look at this whole thing as a collective of, like, this is all the stuff going inside of you, going on inside the author. This was going on inside the author. It's crazy what religion is in some way, right? Like, if you view how the Bene Gesserit or whatever were seeding planets with this mythos, that's no different than all of us being, like, that's the exact same as all of us being told a religious story, like when we're born. Like, we absolutely are just told a religious story by the matriarchy and the patriarchy, but mostly by the matriarchy. Say in the majority of the time you would adopt structurally you adopt the belief of your mother. You inherit what makes sense for your beliefs based on your mother's behavior. Like, that would be the deepest imprinting. So it's like the religious story starts with this feminine imprinting, and then depending on your individuality as you wade through the story, it's like you can definitely fall into a messianic complex that happens due to psychedelic visions. And those psychedelic visions do seem to thrust one person to the center. Like, everyone's doing the psychedelics. Is somehow, the message is that we're all one, but for some reason that, how is this? I don't know how this is possible in any sort of, like, spiritual, meditative, like, enlightenment group. What's going on when there's a leader, there's an ego, or like a guru? Does everyone need that person? like to have that truth. I mean, what is going on there? It's fascinating. Like if you look, I mean, isn't that I mean, I studied that stuff casually. It seems like all the Eastern or all the spiritual truths, it's always like, oh, okay, thou art God, or we are all one, or Christ is God. Or all of the above, like an interesting syncretism. But it's given to all of us back to Dune. So it's like that's crazy in the book. And then the psychedelic visions is what causes this religious fervor to come up. And in the story, like our current story is versions and mirrors of Christianity. It was like that was the last. You could say life as theater, right? Like no people have. There's been no event that people have derived more meaning from. Like no matter what anybody believes of it, like that, there's no one's derived any more meaning from any other, like event in history. Nothing's really ever landed that hard. And then, yeah, you have this idealized version of who your dad is, like some secret embodiment or hidden habitation of your evil, your darkest forces, of your parental lineage. This ability to get people to do whatever you want with just your speech. Like there's these big markers in Dune that are the same as like the big life markers of the body and the powers of the body. Be it like religious fervor. Like religious fervor recruits the full power of the body. Like we walk around all lifeless and stuff. Oh, aches and pains, going to the doctor. It's because there's like no religious fervor. There's no spirit. It's nihilism. So when people get religious fervor, the energy levels are, you know, like if you really have the religious fervor, your energy levels are like on what it's like being on a drug, which is why people did get into religious fervor. It's like they're taking life seriously. And that's the other interesting thing, is just how serious everyone takes it in Dune. There's no, it doesn't have its own postmodernism or anything. Like the power is real, the power is wanted with no just the characters being what they are, with no self-reflection of like of a deeper water. That was dumb. But it's like those mythologies, like looking into the water, looking into matter or reality that way, are as mythological. They're mythological, but they're real. Like scientific stories, but like any stories of intrigue and deception and all that is looking at, like when they resonate in that mythological sense where you go, this rings true. That's the reality of the objects. And it's the reality of the inertia of the objects and how they flow and rush into each other, and the directions and the paths that they take. So it's this mythology of like following a real direction and a path and like a spiraling and just a real movement of being. Whereas So that's you're tracing that, like you project yourself into it as an individual and see where you would flow in those currents, and that's this lower story versus like a Tolkien-esque story, which is telling it's telling the narrative of the timelessness. It's to be viewed all at once, and it's the story of like the vibration that creates the surface of water is like the piano. Reality is like the piano of the voice, this logos, this heavenly realm. And then Maya, Dune, the sand, is, yeah, and in the sand, like in the matter, in the passion, is this like worm of gnawing perception, and then in that worm, in that harshness, is the psychedelic vision in the water. Which is happening right at the sense of self or at the I am, which, like, long story short, you know, you could just like the whole the whole thing is happening just in the I am. But yeah, I need to reread the book again. Otherwise, it seemed like a pretty perfect adaptation. People were complaining about Chani or whatever, but whatever. Like, for what it was, I would say it was as good as Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings in terms of adaptations. I love the books, and I was not left wanting or upset or bothered by any of the changes whatsoever. In my opinion. But again, it's been a long time since I've read the books. And then also it seems in the books like that I think that it got to the point where like Frank Herbert revealed himself to be the god of the Dune books, like just chasing the characters and the imagination around. But anyway, so I think it's cool. I don't think it's. I think it's actually in. I think it's a strong supplement to the work of Tolkien. Kind of in the same place, and I wonder if that's the start of like the mythology of this like deeper physicality is possibly going to start with a movie. The same way that it kind of like the heavenly stuff like ended with a movie. And could you start also with a movie in the epoch to like start this, I guess, new age of understanding of like, I guess, these currents, which is cool. So simultaneously seeing the nitty gritty of reality behind the curtain, not in the nitty gritty looking at the curtain, but you know, in the heavenly realm looking down at the curtain and through the curtain into the nitty gritty of which you're no longer like partaking. So Dune I think is like Dune's most cool when you like super detach from a reality and look at like he was obviously, the first couple books are just obviously channeled. He was obviously doing psychedelics, however he channeled it or whatever. He was in touch with something. There's not no reason the Bible is in the position that it's in terms of its place in the literature canon, and there's no reason why Dune is what it is. I don't think there's any reason why the film adaptations aren't just like also solid. You don't see that anymore, and it's just that I think that would be I've always thought that's like the hardest book. I could never even imagine a movie, and they did it like it was normal, in my opinion. Like I was legit impressed. Hollywood's been sickening, utterly sickening ever since everybody found out about all the stuff that was going on. This has not been, I guess everyone's been distracted, worried, nervous, anxious. I understand. I get it. That's a lot of scandal. I wouldn't want anybody to know either. But the movies have just been terrible. And so it was really surprising that this one was like legit, like, whoa, solid, super just solid. Like, I think that has a certain symbolism in and of itself. You know, it maybe. Yeah, anyway. So that's my thoughts on Dune. Remember, I did a podcast on Dune once. I forgot what I said. It was probably so embarrassing. I lived in the town that Frank Herbert lived in. So now two famous people have lived in Port Townsend. Kurt and Frank. Good old Kurt and Frank.